Hi everyone, I've got Hannah with me today, and sorry, a bit of nerves are coming through because we've got a bit of a different style podcast today, where I'm receiving some harsh feedback on our side of things in the insurtech, fintech, and proptech space from Hannah. So, Hannah, if you could introduce yourself and where your expertise lies and what you do, that would be great.
Yeah, hi, I'm Hannah Miet. My company is HMC, and we are a B2B micro agency. What that really means is I'm a marketing consultant in very specific niches. One of them is my background is in commercial real estate, so prop tech is a big one,
Mhm.
but also B2B SaaS across a variety of different subsectors. And that has included a lot of, the your bread and butter type companies.
Yeah.
Basically, my engagements are sometimes full on fractional CMO, especially in the industries that I have a big background in. So that right now is about 75% of what my work is. And the other 25% is really focused on essentially solving problems related to messaging, which of course comes into play in the fractional CMO jobs. Usually I'm coming in at a startup when they're in a maybe Series B or Series C phase
Mhm.
and really looking at is the messaging ready to raise this money? Is it speaking to the target audience? A lot of times people think they need to talk specifically to investors, but investors are looking at the website, seeing if the messaging is resonant for that target audience, not necessarily for them. They're looking to see, if I was this target buyer, what would my experience be? So I think, doing both is easier than or simpler, let's say, maybe not easy, but simpler. And often what I come in and do is help companies simplify their messaging.
Nice. Okay. Okay. And curious, how often do you find that companies have it right if we're saying as a percentage when you look?
In terms of prospects, I would say usually they know something is amiss. They may have a misdiagnosis, as I call it. It's hard to solve a marketing problem when you don't know what it is, or you think it's one thing, but it's actually another. But usually there is a sense that something needs to be tightened and strengthened. They may not realize it's messaging. It might be, I have a big content background, was an editor in chief in journalism and kind of then came over to the marketing side. So a lot of times my prospect calls are about content to start. And you peel back the layers a little bit and you see there's actually a marketing messaging problem. And so I would say 100% is probably accurate. And I'm not saying every client that comes to me has horrible messaging, but in terms of it not coming in fully baked, that's usually why, even if it's through the lens of content or something that's a little more tactical,
Mm.
people find their way to me. But then in terms of what I see as I'm, browsing LinkedIn, I would say maybe there's 20% that I'm like, oh, that's good.
Okay.
That's good messaging. I really see the positioning in the way they've written their LinkedIn company bio, or, oh, that website heading is really good. And like, I want to save it for my inspiration files. And the other 80%, I'm like, I could help them.
Okay. Yeah. Nice. And it is, so on your background, you mentioned journalism and writing. So yeah, how long has Hannah Meet as a business been operating?
Yeah, I launched in 2022. So it's been 3.5 years now that we've been operating. Before that, I was in-house at a Fortune 100 commercial real estate services firm. So I didn't mention this, but services-based businesses are also a specialty of mine, especially in the like real estate and finance space.
Mm. Okay. Okay. And you mentioned earlier that you've got some team as well now. So what does that look like? How because you're the you're the expert, you're the whiz, right? So how does the team look?
Yeah, basically I am still, and my model is that I always will be the singular point of contact for my clients, but I have a full-time assistant. Her name is Kat. And I have a subcontracted network that has been with me since before I started the business in a lot of cases. People I hired when I was directing content in-house, even some folks that I hired when I was the editor of a journalism publication and then hired when they jumped over that line into marketing and I was, corporate in-house.
Right.
So I bring those relationships with me and they're subcontracted. So really what the client gets is a lean team where they're only interfacing, like you said, with the expert. And also, I'm not hiring people that are not experts. They're experts in their own way. I have someone who's very focused on B2C, whereas I am not. My whole career has really been in B2B. And so, if there is a consumer element to a product, for example, if it has two sides to it, where it's kind of like a business solution and a consumer solution, she's someone I dial up on the phone. So I'm kind of bringing in, but again, the client has a single point of contact. And so I call it a micro agency because it can scale up to be a full team. And for my fractional CMO engagements, for one of them right now, I would say almost my entire subcontracted team is engaged in some way with this company. But also, if it's a consulting engagement, it can be just me and support from my assistant. So it's flexible is what the model is.
Nice. Okay. Okay. No, it sounds like a nice setup. I mean, it makes sense, right? So it's people like to deal with the founder, the lead consultant as such all the time. It means it's easier to actually get more referrals and longer lasting relationships. So yeah, just before we dive into getting the harsh feedback, how do you go about growing yourself? I take it a lot of it is from getting your messaging right, getting the marketing right, and people sharing your stuff. Is that fair?
Referrals is a huge part of just when I tracked last year every sale and just looked at where did it come from, what was the origination. And while I think a lot of my marketing strategies played a part, they were almost entirely referrals or relationships, the
Okay.
R's. They were people that maybe they were reminded that I do what I do because I was posting consistently on LinkedIn, but that wasn't the initial point of generation. It was a referral or a relationship. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So marketing is. I think this is probably where I see a bit of a bit of a gap in people's minds when they're looking at marketing. They think, oh, well, I'm spending X on marketing, so I need to get Y back. But actually,
Mm,
it's these that you've just touched on. It's these hidden metrics that you can't track it, but because people are referring to you and then looking you up online, and then they see actually, wow, this is good stuff. Then
yes,
they're going to inquire, get in touch, and fintechs, insurtechs, proptechs, the same story. You may not generate the enterprise clients off of your marketing from sharing stuff online, but that people will see it. So you
hmm
sing to the same tune as your sales approach. And if you don't invest any time into it, then you're going to have to um, accept probably longer sales cycles, less referrals, all that kind of thing. So
definitely. I mean, B2B is such a long sales process, and it's silly to think, okay, business is coming from referrals and relationships. I should stop, regularly posting on social media. We should not do thought leadership. It's like, no, that's reminding those people. And, despite a lot of I'm big on data and tracking marketing activity, but there's only so much that there has to be a level of trust in building the brand. And I think that's what people miss when they only focus on the marketing metrics is that's the 5% and the 95% is the actual brand and what people think about when they think about the company.
yeah,
And that happens through, messaging, positioning, visual identity.
Mm.
It shows through thought leadership where you're associating the company with a certain kind of expertise based on the people that lead it. So I find really stressing, yes, we do need to move the people that are already in the pipeline through that pipeline. 100% important, usually one of the first things I'm focused on, but also the 95%. How are we going to build trust with them and keep our brand top of mind and associated, frankly, with excellence instead of with, sort of, if you let your brand just get stale, it's not going to form a positive association in your prospects' mind. And maybe they meet someone else that comes to top of mind when it's actually time to make that sale.
Yeah, I completely agree. Completely agree with that. So I've got a question that I'm
By
going.
the way, sorry to interrupt. This is my dog Bagel. He's been on my lap, but he's squirming that he wants to go down. So I just thought I'd say hi first.
Yeah, definitely guest appearance.
Guest appearance, Bagel Schmierstein.
Nice. Okay, so yeah, I've got a few questions off the back of that, but I think I'll save it into when I share. So if we're ready to dive in, so I one of the questions that comes off the back of that is um I've taken the or we've taken the approach at Nurturance of personal brand over business brand. So I would like to hear yeah, your thoughts and feedback on personal brand versus business brand at the offset.
Well, I'd say, first of all, thinking about the channel, which is LinkedIn, business brand is not favored by the algorithm. And I'm not saying that every decision should be made based on the algorithm, but it's one of those things where if a company page posts something versus a person, the
Mm.
person is going to have their entire network engaged and it's going to show up in the algorithm. The company post may get 1 or 2 likes comparatively. Let's say a personal post gets 50. I would say the company page post will get 1 for every 50. That's just, I made up that metric. That's not a tracked and studied
Yeah.
thing, but that's the general trend that I see. So yeah, I think personal brand is so important. And especially when you aren't a huge company and when you're founder led, when your people really lead a lot of interaction with customers for sales, it makes perfect sense. But I think really, like, even in B2B, there's this, it's kind of, I use B2B because it's a helpful shorthand. People understand it in the marketing and sales world. But at the end of the day, we're selling to people
Mm.
and people want to see people they on the other end.
Yeah.
So I'm always a big proponent of personal brand, especially again for the CEO, for any thought leaders at the company to be front and center.
Okay, cool. So that's one tick, but yeah, let's hear some of the harsh feedback on the LinkedIn page.
Okay. I think my harshest feedback is going to be that I don't understand the banner. So is that Nurturance's logo?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I think, in my opinion, best practice for a banner on LinkedIn is to really get the value proposition in there. And for you, since this is your personal page, I think, I love your headlines, actually. I think your headlines are great, both for LinkedIn SEO purposes and that you're really, you're spelling out the industries that you work with,
Mhm.
and that's going to show up in search. You're spelling out what you do. So actually don't have harsh criticism there. I think you did a great job with your headlines.
Yeah.
However, the eyes go to the banner first and your photo. Photo's great. Banner, I don't see the connection between the banner and what's in the headline. And so I think, having a tagline, and this is one of the things I develop with clients, is like a few different taglines for different purposes. One of them being the LinkedIn banner, and then maybe a logo for Nurturance that has the name, so it connects. Like, yes, you are an individual and you're a thought leader, and you have this presence, but this is the brand connection. And I get that looking at the top third of the screen. So with messaging, Whether it's a website or it's a LinkedIn profile, whether it's company or it's personal, it's all about the top third and what that person can gather because executives are busy. And if they're looking to hire someone, a consultant or, a fractional CMO, whatever it may be, it needs to jump out at them in that top half.
Yeah. Okay. No, taken on board definitely. Yeah. I think probably other people may have gone through this same battle in their head. The reason I didn't is because I couldn't get anything to look nice in the
Yes.
so whereas I think at the moment it looks quite clean
It
in
does
the
look clean.
but yeah I can take that on board, yeah, because it's the first thing, right? It pops out blue but it doesn't mean anything. So okay, yeah, I can take
And
that
I
on.
would recommend if you're able to, Canva is a really intuitive tool for like non-designers to design. And so it would make, taking what you already have and just giving it a quick edit. Once you have that tagline and know what font you want to use, it can be done in 20 minutes. It's one that I really like because I more come from the editorial side of marketing, not from the design side. But obviously, when I'm a fractional CMO, I'm thinking about logo, I'm thinking about visual identity. Often there really isn't one consistently when I'm coming in. And so I need to be able to, at the very least, express to a designer or to a creative team, here are my ideas. And Canva is like amazing for that and for just kind of quick design edits. So I would recommend it if you're able to get a subscription.
Okay, yeah, cool. Canva will be used. We won't go through all of this, but just a general feel. Other than that, strong enough. Anything that you hate?
Let me see. I see about the problem founders and miss revenue targets. Yeah, I think like in terms of the about, I love problem agitate solution framework where you're presenting the problem, digging the knife in a little
Yeah.
bit on the pain related to that problem and the consequences if it goes, if business as usual is continues and then presenting yourself as the solution. But I think for particularly for the LinkedIn, having a bit of a first sentence that's like very high level,
Hmm.
who I am, for the people that didn't gather it from the banner,
Yeah.
or just want a little more reinforcement, and then jumping into the problem. And it's interesting because I like your what I'm not. Um, I wonder if you could pair it with what I am and what I'm not.
Yeah, okay.
Is always a helpful just setting up. Like people are looking at sales consultant for fintech, prop tech, and insurtech. That's bringing up any association they have
Hmm.
with positive and negative experiences. And so I really like the what I'm not, but I also like the idea of now I'm thinking of a website, is kind of like what we are, what we are not,
Okay.
with the check marks. It's always helpful and it makes it scannable. But I do like how you've made this very readable with headings and you're keeping it concise. I'm looking more here. Yeah, I think I like that you have social proof here. I might change the word because I think that's more internal facing. Like to us as sales and marketing, it's like, let's get the social proof out there. But to the reader, it's more like, what my customers say or like what my like hear it, don't hear it from me, hear it from my clients. Just a little more taking that internal language and putting it external. I would say the same for the problem and solution.
Yeah.
It's I do say in my LinkedIn about to be completely transparent, I say like, here are some problems I solve, and I have like a bulleted list. So I'm not saying never say problem, but you may want to think what is like, can I just jump right into something I've noticed that is frequently causing my customers pain is X, and then you have it so the framing is a little more personal and in their parlance instead of kind of, I think a big challenge with writing a LinkedIn page or an about section in a website is, making sure that that is written to the client or customer and not, we're so in our own sense of what we are that it's easy to let that concept slip away. But I think it's at the heart of really effective marketing is ensuring that we're speaking to that customer in their language.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. No, that's that makes sense. And yeah, I think it is hard for people to do, and the fintechs definitely looking at maybe when they're dealing with either banks or commercial lenders, like the different language and stuff like that. People that will yeah use your I think also using your customer's language instead. Okay. No, that's
And
taken.
sometimes you need to workshop that with the customer. Like, for example, can you scroll back up a tiny bit? Like when I read, and I'm not your target audience really, but when I, as a fractional CMO who touches on some of these industries, it's like I help founders and sales leads build precision revenue systems, multi-threaded buyer engagement, signal-based pipeline tracking. I have some sense of what those are, but not like it's definitely in the jargon. Now, I try to avoid jargon in general just to keep things really simple so anyone in a buying group can understand it, since there's always so many different players in the industries that I focus on. It's like you've got a CIO and a CTO and all of these different folks. But I think, if that is truly the language that your buyer understands, then that would be a good data point to consider. So I like to have some way of you know, talking with customers and clients and making sure that the messaging and the word choices are hitting, because it very well could be that that is exactly what your ICP needs to hear.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. No, that makes sense. Yeah, definitely taken on board. Okay. Should we move to the website?
Yeah, let's do it.
This is where I'm least confident. Um, okay, I've made a quick video to explain what we do as a business, and I wanted to let you know because you probably got the burning question of who's this guy? Why is he asking these questions? What does he know about sales? Well, I put it all in the video, so click on it. It's in the description and in the comments, and I'll let you get back to the podcast now. Yeah, what I thoughts.
So right away, I would say Nurturance ABS consultancy is not, it shouldn't be in a hero statement because it's not giving me like what to expect. And I see it before I see this. So this is the hero section of a website is what we're looking at right now. It's what you see immediately when it loads. You've got your first headline, which is Nurturance ABS consultancy. And then your subheading here is the second part of the hero. It's really your hero statement. Now, I would take the name again and put it next to the logo, make a new logo where the name and the associated font is right next to. I don't think there's anything off the gate wrong with your current logo other than the version of it for the website would make more sense with the name so that you can really dive into just a very short version of your strongest value proposition in the headline. So, I mean, I think it can get more specific than turn your sales into a powerhouse, but I would say that would be like if you wanted a quick fix, make that your headline. It's getting in the direction of a tagline, of a very condensed way of communicating. This is our biggest value. I also worry that these three, like turn your sales into a powerhouse, effortless sales, let us streamline. It looks like I would have to get into the back end of the website to see this, but it looks like they may be headings, like all of them. And that can have a negative SEO impact if you don't have, like, they want to see heading. When I say they, I mean like search engines want to see heading and then your subheading, your hero statement, and then body kind of text, graphics, etc. And if you have too many things, and this is a technical thing, it's like if they're in there as H1s, that's a negative SEO signal and it can cause indexing problems. So that might be something to consider too. But I want to look at the actual language here. Effortless sales processes for tech innovators. Let us streamline. So I think what is missing here is the unique differentiator of nurturance. And that we need that front and center. way more than we need the name. The name, if, attached to the logo, and then we don't want to not say sales. Like I always stress when talking about the differentiated value, we still have to say what the thing is that we're selling. And so I like, there's something in turn your sales into a powerhouse that I do like. It's just not quite there in terms of what makes Cormac unique, what makes Nurturance unique. So I think this is where the formal messaging and positioning that I do with my clients comes in, because it's basically looking at what are your true differentiators in the market, and that's through a mix of market research and really just digging and finding, like with the founder, what makes you special, especially for a founder-led company or a consultancy that's based on expertise. It's actually about the people too. What's their, I like to call it special magic. Like what's your special magic? And then figuring out the phrasing to really highlight that. And in a messaging and positioning engagement, the goal is really to centralize the entire company on how to communicate the value of the company and its major selling points in short and concise language. So it's not like you take the messaging document that everyone now sort of has as truth and you just copy and paste it to the website. I mean, for the company I'm currently fractional CMO at, like I brought in my favorite copywriter to take the messaging and translate it to the homepage. And now like we're working through revisions. And so I get my hands in that process, but I'm also, copywriters for websites specifically are getting a really specialized one can help like transform that messaging into a real sales asset, and a marketing asset. But I think going through some kind of process, I mean, maybe I ask you right now, what do you think makes you different than other, like people who would say, turn your sales into a powerhouse?
So I think for us, it's the unique point from our perspective, and maybe the feedback from our clients is actually building a sales step-by-step system where it is like a sports team. It is people having the defined roles and being the best at what they do, and then that churns out a lot better performance. There's less variability. Everyone is singing from the same hymn sheet. I think that's our unique approach is. It's very data backed and scientific to find who's the best in this role, who fits into this place, and then why do they fit in that place, what makes them tick, all of the different data points, pulling them together to turn it into a machine instead of just saying, okay, we think this, not looking at the data, which I think most people don't do, isn't so data backed through everything they do. It's more data backed through results only.
Interesting. And so when you say people in this case, is this like you're dealing with the sales team and you're kind of identifying, like, can you tell me a little bit more about with identifying like who is good at what? How does that play into your consulting?
Yeah, so we work closely with the different sales members. We maybe are moving sales team members between different roles. Maybe we're bringing in new sales team members, and all of them are going through a deep diagnosis or assessment for all of their strengths and then how they've performed across each different task instead of their own. Usually the just salespeople are tracked on how many either meetings they've booked or deals they've closed.
I see. That makes a lot of sense. And how do you feel like, do you have a sense of what market norm is versus some of your processes in that regard?
Yeah, I think so market norm. So when we go in, usually there isn't the clear measuring for these businesses. So they will measure one metric, which tends to be more of a vanity metric, and there's a lot missing. They aren't across that's it across the team side of things, but they also aren't necessarily targeting the right accounts in the right way, and they're not. When I said multi-threaded earlier, what I mean by that is people will have one or two decision maker stakeholders that are champions within the business are saying yes, but then there's actually another five that are
I see. I
so
think that's like there's something there about invisible stakeholders, right? Like you're reaching so and again, we'd want to avoid the jargon, but just for the sake of the quick, easy within our conversation, it's like these B2B buying groups have a lot of people in them. As consultants, we're engaged with they may be the champion, they may be, they're the advocate passing the baton on to someone. You as the, let's say, head of sales may not know who that baton is being passed to. Sometimes clients are transparent about that, sometimes not, and customers. So you're coming in and you're saying, hey, we have done the market research, we have the data that backs up who is in this buying group. Is that what you're saying?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And making sure that the team understand it as well. So there's not that over reliance on us moving forwards. They say, actually, this is the process that we follow to make sure we've mapped everyone out.
Yeah, I think like this isn't going to be the right language because messaging is always it's sort of a throw spaghetti at the wall and then refine it process. It's so much fun. But I did get a hit on um, like your message isn't reaching invisible decision makers, like, and then some kind of benefit statement about like for the hero section, something like that, like our data, our market research, like gives you X, kind of, and then you can place your just place the person in exactly what this is and how it's different in the top.
Okay. And so again, not using the over complicated words or simplifying it, but then kind of, if I've understood this right, it's explaining it in a way that they already understand instead of like teaching them something new. So when you said about the invisible decision makers, it's like they can imagine that, they understand that.
Exactly. It's taking it into simple language is always, I would say if I have one tip, it's single language, focusing on one idea, one big idea that is your main statement that everything kind of ladders up to and connects to. That's what makes like effective sales writing.
Nice. Okay, cool. No, I like that. Should we do a quick whistle stop on the YouTube and then
Yeah.
um because obviously, like you said, the website, the key thing is when people land on it. So I think the other stuff, right, is people already bought in past that stage. So
Mhm.
um, what are your thoughts when you land on the YouTube? Probably similar with the banner.
Similar with the banner. And it's interesting because when you reached out to me and we first started connecting, this is where I landed and I was confused. I will be honest. So I can speak from, again, I'm not exactly, I would say a fractional CMO could bring in a consultant like you, especially since when there's no head of sales, we tend to be the head of sales by default. It's not that we usually want to be, but it sometimes happens. And so maybe I'm somewhat in your target, but not like dead on your target ICP. So take that with a grain of salt. But I wasn't sure if this was just a personal podcast or if there was like a brand associated with it. So I think having nurturance in the name, in the logo, and then a value prop up top about the company that is, it can be honestly for a podcast, it doesn't have to be just the value of the company. It can kind of be the value of the podcast, but just making it clear that this is a branded podcast and you are the host versus like this is your personal YouTube page, because that was what I was confused about. And so like, even having your name in this, where right here where it says sharing sales insights and podcasts, like your name and your title at the company. So you're still giving that human element, but you're putting yourself in the context really quickly so that people can understand.
Okay, yeah, yeah, because it's so I imagine other people have done the similar thing wrong, where it's like, okay, they've tried to go too far on the personal brand side of things, and it's feels disconnected and a bit confusing, and yeah, okay, okay. And then when you look at the channel as a whole, I don't know if you did you then think, okay, this looks like a professional thing? Is that what people think about? Do they think about the thumbnails? Is that something that people should be putting weight towards?
Definitely. I do think people make decisions visually in general, and thumbnails may be both thumbnails and the headline will make the decision for the person will make the decision on whether to watch based on that.
Mm.
Um, I always am a fan of when there's a spicy quote, making that the what is the word I'm looking for?
Like the
Um,
thumbnail headline sort
the
of.
thumbnail, right? For some reason, that word escaped my brain. The thumbnail, I would say sometimes there's a bolder way to do it, like understanding our ICP unlocked a whole new revenue stream. I wonder if there's something specific that was shared about how to understand your ICP, that like it could be something like this is a little too dramatic, but just again, the throwing spaghetti at the wall.
Mm.
Um, this ICP strategy changed our revenue by X, like just kind of getting like what selling the thumbnail is there to sell the video.
Yeah.
And the headline is too. So obviously you want to incorporate what it's about in there, give a person a sense of what it's about, but you also want to grab them. So just balancing that, like being informative so the person doesn't start watching thinking it's something it's not, but balancing that with a bit of that hook, which is usually referred to as the first seconds of the podcast, but it's I would say there's like the pre-hook,
Yeah.
which is the headline and the thumbnail. Yeah, I think you're getting close with a lot of these. Like if you need to know Dunbar's numbers if you want to sell big deals, like it's like you can't you can't sell X without
Yeah.
this concept. People may not be searching for Dunbar's numbers, but they will be searching for like sales strategies, and then you can get more granular with that to target your specific audience, like in terms of the terms that they use. It requires a little research, but I generally think you're on the right track. I like that there's some sense in these thumbnails that this isn't just a personal podcast, because it does, like, clearly you've put some graphic design into it. It doesn't look like a personal page when you look at the thumbnails. I think you can level that up
Yeah.
by having kind of like standard templates that are branded where you can see nurturance more clearly. I do see that there's a little logo here, and maybe if I press play, I'd see like the screen with the logo in the beginning. That's always a good idea. Just kind of a quick touch point of placing us in the context of this is this brand's podcast.
Mhm.
Because I think, podcasts are a little bit different than that LinkedIn page in the sense that, people do. I'm a huge podcast listener. I listen to podcasts anytime I'm doing something that is like, walking the dog, or I'm even in the shower, driving. And I think that, you keep listening because of a individual personality, but to start listening, some kind of trust and credibility needs to be established. And I think placing yourself in the context of the brand, since this is ultimately a promotion vehicle for the brand, that will achieve that.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. I really like that. So I think the easy first thing for me to implement straight away, and I think the will with actually the video wise is just having a like an intro trailer style thing with the brand, right? That would be quite cool, I think, because at the moment it is just straight into the call. I think one point that I wanted to touch on, which I think could be valuable for people listening that are putting content out there. If you notice, so I noticed that whenever I would post these thumbnails before, I would get more views, and I think sometimes people would then say, would then revert back. Which obviously we're not doing. We're doubling down even further because we started doing more styled thumbnails. Then we said actually this looks okay, but it's not as, I think, and doesn't have as much of a professional look as maybe these styles. Whereas I think some people would maybe say, okay, but the past podcast with the bad titles, the bad thumbnails used to get more. So are we? Well, I guess is that the right thinking? What's your advice to people that maybe are going through a similar thing where they're spending more, they're putting more time and effort into the marketing, and that there's a bit of a dip at the initial?
Yeah.
Is that something that's common? And what's your advice?
So I would say, especially for B2B, you can have a successful YouTube channel that doesn't have a high amount of views. It's successful if it's actually hitting your niche.
Yeah.
And so what I often recommend is like take the idea of, tens of thousands of views or whatever the benchmark you have in your head is off the table for B2B and ask what has this podcast resulted in? And, brand, I would say a podcast is a brand effort. It takes time.
Yeah.
So I think, like I always make a joke, you have to actually stick to your marketing strategy in order to see if it's working. And a lot of times companies completely throw it out the window and then they're like, we're not getting the results we want from our marketing. I'm like, ah. Like you have to do the strategy consistently. And with a buying cycle that can be a year and a half long in B2B, it's like you really got to be consistent and see. But I would say, analytics around data around who is watching, views are great, but like maybe you could find after digging in that, maybe your audience is largely boomers that are the decision makers, and Gen Z it loves the video with the people talking without much like stylization, like less stylized. And the boomers were, it's kind of like who are the decision makers we're reaching? And that's where like the ICP research and really defining like this is the dream client comes into play, because you can speak to them and it doesn't matter if that means less views. So it's a little of a sideways into answering your question, but I think that I wouldn't necessarily worry. I would be more worried if over a long period of time, you're not seeing any results in terms of number of opportunities or like your followers growing slowly over time, things like that. Because I also think someone who hits subscribe is a different like segment than someone who just watches a video or two. And it's easier to get the watches than to get the subscriptions. So that can be a good like metric to just keep an eye on, and then also see like who are these people, or any of them in my target demo.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, that's I think this has been amazing. I think it's been really cool to see your brain work around the marketing side of things live, which is impossible unless you are an expert in what you do. So I think it's been really great. I think there's been loads that the reason that we did this is not for necessarily my brand, but just to show like there's things people people can improve if people were watching and they thought, okay, this Cormac's page looks okay. There's so much more to it, and that's why the value comes in working with people like yourself. So what does the year ahead look like for you? What's your goals, aspirations?
The dog is barking now, of course. It's always at the moment that I'm speaking. Um, he's only a year old, so he's a puppy.
Yeah.
The year ahead is looking intense because I am my fractional CMO engagements are in like real, I would say a hyper speed time. But I'm focused on, as I'm sure you know well, balancing the marketing efforts for clients while making sure that my brand doesn't also dry out on the line while I'm like frankly overbooked right now, which is a great place to be and I'm not complaining, but it's like when you're at 120%, you still have to find some way to put effort into your brand. So I've been playing around with like a conversation like this where I bring in my AI chatbot to transcribe it and then like mining that for LinkedIn posts, not like I would copy and paste exactly what I said. There'll be ums. I say the word basically way too much. I know these things about myself, but getting the key ideas in my own voice in like a faster way. Um, and sometimes there's just got to be acceptance of, when it's a big client push time, things are going to be a little less consistent when it comes to marketing my own consultancy HMC. But I feel like, they're I'm striving for balance this year and also got a lot of travel coming up. So I'm looking forward to that as well.
Nice. Okay, cool. Well, yeah, Hannah, let's definitely keep in touch, see how things progress. We'll have you back on in a year's time.
Love that.
Obviously, there's a lot of work that you've got on your plate at the moment, but if people did want to get in touch, where should they go?
Yeah. So my website is myname.net. It's Hannah Miet, HANNAHMIET .net. And you can also find me on LinkedIn, Hannah Miet. And yeah, it's some form of my name on all socials. And get in touch. Also email hannah@hannahmiet.net. Easy.
Perfect. Well, I'll put the links and the email in the description, so yeah, people can reach out. And then yeah, I think that's it. So thanks for coming on, Hannah.
Thank you for having me. This was lovely.